foggy night, shadows creeping slow, whispers in the wind where Johnny go. Blood on the hay, pitchfork gleam, midnight moon, a witness to a scream. Barn doors creaking, secrets kept tight. Old man Joe seen a deadly sight. No justice found, just a broken plow. Crows peck the ground, dead man's vow. Murder in the meadow, lies thick as dust. Promises shattered, betrayed by trust. Chaos in the cornfields.
Jamie here with Country Diggers. Today we're going to go into the history of Jesse Harding Pomeroy, the Boston Boy Fiend. And I'll be reading from The Bloody Century, True Tales of Murder in 19th Century America by Robert Wilhelm. He also does the murderbygaslight.com website. And this is not a murder ballad, although it does have music, but it's modern. It's by Rupert Gregson Williams. The song is Jesse Pomeroy, and it is on the Alienist soundtrack. The TV show The Alienist is on the soundtrack, but no music to it. It's just instrumental. And I will also be reading from Boston1775.blogspot.com, a poem written by Jesse Pomeroy. So all right, I'm going to read the poem first. It's from Boston1775.blogspot.com. And this is Jesse Harding's Pomeroy's Tea Party poem. The poem, A Boston Brew of Tea, Sir, was written by Jesse Harding Pomeroy, 1859 to 1932, and published in The Mentor on March 25, 1916. Pomeroy, born in Charleston, was quite familiar with the patriotic mythology of his home state and was echoing it back in an old-fashioned style. Of 73, the tale we sing, that famous brew whose taste did sting. The deed on winter's night was done, sir, a noble pot to make our brew. From Boston port the waves to stew, and Johnny Bull did drink his full, for relish to his taste, sir. The monarch proud of England's shores thought tax on tea was pence in store. But soon his tone was changed, sir, for Yankees bold will pay no tax, where principles are found too lax. King George did taste and make a face that never yet was straight, sir. Not all the strength of English might, nor coming years in fame so bright, could wash his mouth of tea, sir. It took his nerve as never yet, into his pate new ideas let. J.B. may strive on pence to thrive. We served his piping hot, sir. From small beginnings, much may come. Across the years we view their sum. Our stamps were not for George, sir. Our gallant sires, undaunted, were in fight for freedom, sweet and pure. For Johnny Bull could pull no wool across the Yankees' eyes, sir. Their noble fame to us ever brings a trust and hope wrought more than kings, a quenchless flame to guard, sir. In courage tried our temples near, when memories true to shield from fear. Fail we do not, nor rights forget, to twist the lion's tail, sir. That brand of tea should now be named, for spicy flavor justly famed. The Hub's exclusive brew, sir. Peacoat, Hyson, Bohea, Oglong may find some praise in other song, but for its vim and snap so grim, gunpowder be its name, sir. All right. As poetry, it's nothing special. But what makes this verse unusual is that Pomeroy was serving a life sentence for a murder he committed at age 14. In an autobiographical account published around the time of his trial, Pomeroy wrote of reading Benjamin Franklin's autobiography as his alibi for killing another child. James told a long, detailed story that included walking past the granary burying ground and seeing what he thought was Franklin's grave. The court convicted him anyway. The governor of Massachusetts refused to sign a death warrant for such a young murderer, and eventually Pomeroy's sentence was changed to life in prison in solitary confinement. In 1916, he wrote this poem. He had been serving that sentence for 40 years. His signature in the Monitor, the prison magazine, was Grandpa, reflecting his relative age. The following year, the state allowed Pomeroy to mingle with other prisoners. In 1929, he was transferred to a mental hospital where he died. All right, now I'll go into the Bloody Centuries story. All right, The Boston Boy Fiend by Robert Wilhelm. On December 22nd, 1871, 4-year-old Billy Payne was found hanging by his wrist, half naked from the roof beam of a tumble-down privy on Powderhorn Hill in Chelsea, Massachusetts. His back was covered with welts from a whipping. Over the next 9 months, 7 more children, none older than 8, were found tied and brutally tortured in Chelsea and South Boston. The assaults became increasingly vicious, and in 1874 resulted in the deaths of a 4-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl. When the killer was proven to be 14-year-old Jesse Pomeroy, Massachusetts had to face 2 tough questions. Could someone so brutal be considered sane? And if so, did the Commonwealth have the will to execute the boy fiend? I can tell you what should have happened to him, but some people don't like that. But anyway, dates: March 18th, 1874, and April 22nd, 1874. Location: Boston, Massachusetts. Victims: Katie Curran and Horace Millen. Cause of death: stabbing. Accused: Jesse Harding Pomeroy. Jesse Pomeroy did not have an easy time as a young boy. From infancy, his right eye had been covered over with a white film. Some said due to cataracts. Others blamed a virulent infection or reaction to a smallpox vaccination. It left him with an appearance that many people found revolting and made him the object of ridicule among older boys. Jesse's own father, Thomas Pomeroy, could barely stand to look at him. When angry at his son, Thomas would flog Jesse's bare back with his belt. After one such beating, Jesse's mother, Ruth Ann Pomeroy, drove her husband out of the house with a kitchen knife, and he never returned. Jesse was an intelligent boy, if somewhat antisocial. He would not join the other boys in baseball games or other athletic pursuits, but he was fond of playing Scouts and Indians, where he would invariably be an Indian and devise elaborate imaginary tortures for captive scouts. Jesse had always been a problem for his mother. She knew he stole money from her and was always playing hooky from school, and she knew he had a vicious streak. Years earlier, she had come home from work one day to find the heads twisted off her pet canaries. Serial killer in the making. The Pomeroys were living in Chelsea, a neighborhood of Boston, when young Billy Payne was found beaten in the Powderhorn Hill outhouse. Billy was unable to describe his attacker, and no one suspected that the assailant was a child himself. On February 21st, 1872, 7-year-old Tracy Hayden had been lured to the same abandoned outhouse by a big boy with brown hair. He was tied, stripped naked, and whipped across the back. The boy hit him in the face with a board, breaking his nose and knocking out 2 teeth. Then he threatened to cut off Tracy's penis. A third victim, Robert Mayer, age 8, was taken to the same outhouse on May 20th and given similar treatment. Over the next few weeks, Chelsea police questioned hundreds of boys, but made no arrest. A rumor began to circulate that the attacker was a young man with fiery red hair, pale skin, arched eyebrows, and a pointy chin, and a wispy red beard. In their communal fear, the people of Chelsea had described the devil. After 7-year-old Johnny Balsh was stripped and flogged on July 22nd, the press named the assailant the boy torturer, and a $500 reward was offered for his capture. While all of the parents in Chelsea were worried for the safety of their children, Ruth Ann Pomeroy worried for a different reason. She feared the attacker might be her own child. Ruth Ann decided it would be a good time to leave Chelsea. She moved her family to South Boston and opened a dress shop. The assaults moved to South Boston as well, becoming increasingly frequent and increasingly brutal. On August 17th, 7-year-old George Pratt was abducted. Pratt was not just flogged. This time the abductor stuck a needle in his arm and his groin and bit chunks of flesh from his face and buttocks. On September 5th, the assailant began using a knife, stabbing 6-year-old Harry Austin under the arms and between the shoulder blades, and he attempted unsuccessfully to cut off his penis. Less than a week later, he used a knife on 6-year-old Joseph Kennedy, then threw salt water on the wounds. 6 days after that, wielding 2 knives, he slashed 5-year-old Robert Gould's scalp and threatened to kill him. But he was interrupted by some approaching railroad workers. Robert Gould, the 8th victim, was the first to give a useful description of his attacker. He said it was a big boy with a funny eye. When asked about the eye, Robert said it was like a milky, the children's name for a milk-white marble. The police wanted Robert Gould to go to local schools and identify his attackers. From the boys sitting in class, but Robert's scalp had required stitches and his parents would not let him leave the house. They took Joseph Kennedy instead, and though he was taken to Jesse Pomeroy's class, he was unable to identify his attacker. That day after school, for reasons Jesse was never able to explain, he went to the police station. Seeing Joseph Kennedy there, he quickly turned and left the station, but a policeman followed him out and brought him back. Now looking closer, young Joseph saw the white eye and identified Jesse as his torturer. Jesse was held in a cell overnight and was persuaded to confess. The next day, all of the victims identified him as their attacker. Jesse, then 12 years old, was sentenced to the reformatory for the term of his minority, a period of 6 years. At the Massachusetts home of Reformation in Westboro, Jesse quickly adapted. He stayed away from the older boys who taunted him, as they always had, and the younger boys who knew why he was there steered clear of Jesse. Knowing that good behavior was the only way to leave the reformatory early, he did his work, applied himself to his studies, and even informed on his fellow inmates. Outside, Ruth Ann continually pressed for her son's release until on January 24th, 1874, less than 17 months after his arrest, Jesse Pomeroy was set free on probation. The morning of March 18th, 1874, 10-year-old Katie Curran left her home to buy a notebook for school and never returned. She was last seen entering Mrs. Pomeroy's store. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Jesse's history, and the Currans feared the worst. At the police station, Captain Dreyer assured Mrs. Curran that Jesse could not be involved. He had been completely rehabilitated. Ain't that what we're told today? Besides, he was only known to attack little boys. Katie's father was a Catholic, and reflecting the attitudes of the time, local rumors said he sent her to a convent without telling her mother. On April 22nd, 1874, 4-year-old Horace Millen disappeared. Several people that day had seen the little boy accompanied by an older boy headed towards McKay's Wharf. That afternoon, in a clambait pit on Savin Hill Beach, Horace Millen's half-naked corpse was found. He had been stabbed 6 times in the chest, his head was nearly severed, and he was partially castrated. When Boston's chief of police, Edward Hartwell Savage, heard of the murder, his first thought was of Jesse Pomeroy, but he believed Pomeroy was still safely at the reformatory. When his men told him that Jesse was out on probation, Savage ordered his immediate arrest. On the beach, police found footprints left by the 2 boys and were able to make plaster casts of the larger ones. They matched Jesse's shoes perfectly. Jesse was questioned and confronted with the evidence, but refused to confess. Finally, they took him to the funeral parlor to view the body, and he broke down. He admitted he killed Horace, that something made him do it. He was sorry and wanted to leave. He told the policeman, "Put me somewhere so I can't do such things." The notoriety was terrible for Mrs. Pomeroy's dress business, and she was forced to close her shop and work out of her house. The building was taken over by Nash's grocery store, and while workmen were doing renovations, they experienced a terrible odor coming from the basement. The source was the decaying body of Katie Curran, found under an ash heap. She was identified by her clothing, and though badly decomposed, police could tell she had been stabbed and mutilated. Mrs. Pomeroy and her other son, Charles, were arrested for murder. Jesse was told this and questioned aggressively about Katie Curran until he finally confessed to the murder. Later, he would claim he confessed only to save his mother, but was not really guilty. He would also recant his confession to Horace Millen's murder. The trial, December 8th, 1874. The trial of Jesse Pomeroy for the murder of Horace Millen lasted 4 days. The prosecution introduced testimony of those who had found the body and those who saw Horace with a bigger boy that day. Some could identify Jesse in court as that boy. Their strongest evidence was the confession Jesse had made at the time of his arrest. The defense argued that Jesse was innocent by reason of insanity. They called Jesse's victims, some still seriously disfigured from the attacks, to prove the insanity of his actions. They also introduced testimony from physicians and alienists who believed that Jesse was insane. The prosecution had its own experts who concluded that Jesse knew right from wrong and acted anyway. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours and returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. Though Massachusetts law required mandatory execution for first-degree murder. And remember, first-degree murder is premeditated. The jury recommended the sentence be commuted to life in prison. That issue would not be resolved for another year and 9 months. The verdict, guilty of first-degree murder, and the aftermath. The debate raged locally and nationally, in the press, in public opinion, and among lawyers and politicians, whether justice and public safety could only be accommodated by the hanging of Jesse Pomeroy, or whether it was immoral to hang a boy who was only 14 at the time of his crime. The matter was settled in August 1876 when the Massachusetts Executive Council decided to commute the sentence to solitary confinement for the rest of Jesse Pomeroy's life. Jesse Pomeroy was 16 years old when he entered Charleston State Prison. Except for a brief period in the 1880s when the prison was being renovated, he spent the next 53 years there, 41 of those years in solitary confinement. Only one prisoner in American history was in solitary confinement longer. Robert Stout, the Birdman of Alcatraz, and only by 1 year. Though he had attempted to escape many times, Jesse would never leave prison. In 1929, old and infirm, he was transferred to the state prison farm at Bridgewater, where he could be better cared for. He died there on September 29, 1932, 2 months before his 73rd birthday. Well, I can tell you right now, my opinion, I don't care if he was bullied as a child. I don't care if he was abused by his father. That is bad, and that shouldn't have happened. But he made up his own mind to do what he did. And if you're going to do big people crimes, then you should do big people time. And he should have been hanged. All right. That's all I got to say. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.